Greetings, everybody. My name is James. I am from the internet, and today we are going to be talking about history repeating itself. Now, over the course of the last month, I have brought to you a number of stories about laborers, workers, members of the working class, organizing and demanding better from the people to whom they sell their labor so that they can pay the bills, keep a roof over their head, keep the lights on, and, hopefully be able to hold on to their kids without the state taking them away due to neglect because they can't even afford to get them the basic necessities of life. And so many of these events, these protests, these strikes have taken place that I have even commented more than once that the rate of their occurrence is now happening at a nearly historical clip. And that is the point at which I started to get a little blowback from people who all seemed on board with the whole working class solidarity up until then. People told me to, maybe pump the brakes. Hey, this is just the same organized labor bullshit we always have. Nothing's really changing. And to this, I would like to remind you that here in the United States of America, we have very little class awareness. And because of that, we have very little class solidarity. And a lot of this is purposeful. If you look at what we are taught in school, very little American history focuses on the history of labor. Now, while we may occasionally hear a historical story about stuff like the Battle of Cripple Creek or the railroad shop workers strike or that sort of thing, we rarely hear about the dozens of other strikes and the hundreds, if not thousands of meetings that took place amongst laborers to make a whole series of events occur before that large historical event happened that ultimately tipped the scale. So, rather than poo-pooing and discussing how we don't have a full general strike and there aren't 70 million people out in the street refusing to work, take their kids to school, or even go to the bathroom, I am instead going to focus on the constant litany of wins, because taking the small W every single day, a hell of a lot better than taking the big L that we've been taking for years. So let's put another one up on the board for organized labor. Here we go. Workers at all of Kellogg's U.S. cereal plants go on strike. Work is halted at all of the Kellogg Company's U.S. cereal plants as roughly 1,400 workers went on strike at midnight. The strike includes plants in Omaha, Nebraska, Battle Creek, Michigan, Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and Memphis, Tennessee. The union and the Battle Creek-based company have been at an impasse at the bargaining table for more than a year, said Daniel Osborne, president of the local union in Omaha. The dispute involves an assortment of pay and benefit issues, such as loss of premium health care, holiday and vacation pay, and reduced retirement benefits. Quote, the company continues to threaten to send additional jobs to Mexico if workers don't accept outrageous proposals that take away protections that workers have had for decades. Now, before we continue, allow me to do a little corporate bullshit to English translation for you, okay? Right there in the middle, where they tell you that the union and the company have been bargaining for a year and haven't been able to strike a deal, let me explain to you what that means in layman's terms. The company knew that the labor contract with this union was going to expire in another 12 months, and rather than meet them halfway a year earlier, they instead decided to continue paying them as little as possible while working them as hard as possible for the entire year leading up to the end of the contract to maximize their profitability. Now, and only now, that the strike has actually been called, are the people at Kellogg's now going to actually engage in what some people might call good faith negotiations, because now there's a chance their productivity might be disrupted. Up until then, They didn't give a shit. They were more than happy to let the labor unions huff and puff and talk about everything they want, and they'd scratch their beard and go, oh, I don't know. I'm gonna have to run that uphill and talk to them. I'll get back to you next month. Yeah, they did that for as long as possible. Now there's 1,400 union laborers sitting outside of all their plants, making sure the scabs don't get in. The threat to move work to Mexico doesn't sit well with Osborne. Quote, a lot of Americans probably don't have too much issue with the Nike or Under Armour hats being made elsewhere, or even our vehicles. But when they start manufacturing our food down where they're out of the FDA control and OSHA control, I have a huge problem with that. The company insists that its offer is fair and would increase wages and benefits for its employees that it said made an average of $120,000 a year last year. Quote, we're disappointed by the union's decision to strike. Kellogg provides compensation and benefits for our U.S. ready-to-eat cereal employees that are among the industry's best. For the record, the industry is a total of like 4 corporations. They make all the cereal. So to say that Kellogg provides compensation that is among the industry's best, well, technically speaking, all 4 of these cereal companies are among the industry's best because they're like the only 4 companies. The company acknowledged that it is, quote, implementing contingency plans to limit supply disruptions for consumers. Yeah, that would be bringing in the aforementioned scabs that I told you about in the intro. Yeah, expect busloads of scabs to start showing up to, do the same work that highly trained professionals have been doing in an efficient and safe manner, and just, cross your fingers and hope nobody actually loses crossed fingers in the middle of a production line that moves at like 80 miles an hour. The plants have all continued to operate throughout the coronavirus pandemic, but Osborne said that for much of that time, workers were putting in 12-hour shifts 7 days a week to keep up production while so many people were out because of the virus. Quote, the level we were working at is unsustainable. Now, if you watched either of the videos I did about the Frito-Lay strike or the Nabisco strike, this should sound familiar. Why? Because industries essentially implement the same type of programs that are successful all across the industry. If you see somebody doing something and they post good numbers, you do the same. And so essentially what happened is everybody in manufacturing decided that rather than hiring people by paying good wages during the pandemic, to offset some of the risk-reward factor that goes into the decision of whether or not you should leave your house to go work in the middle of a global pandemic, they instead decided to stand pat with the labor they had so they didn't have to spend any more money training people or paying payroll tax for more people or giving more people health insurance. They just decided to work everybody to the brink of exhaustion to the point where they had no quality of life left. This is happening at just about every single manufacturing facility around the United States of America because capitalists and the investor class do not give a shit about any of us. And now, a few notes and perhaps a little perspective before I wrap all this up and move on with my day. Number 1, this convenient list, posted right outside one of the Kellogg's facilities as a reminder to all the people who are standing out there right now with picket signs and aren't working. Well, it would seem that somebody did a little research and they found out what the total compensation is of the CEO and the 2 senior VPs for Kellogg's Inc. Well, it turns out that between those 3 people, they make about $18 million a year in combined salary. And it would appear that unlike all of the workers, they have not taken pay cuts. They have not taken reductions to their total compensation, i.e. their retirement plan, i.e. their health benefits, nor have these people been required to work 90 hours a week like the laborers have been. No, they've had it pretty easy peasy. They're putting in the same exact work they were putting in before the pandemic. The only difference is they're working their employees harder while they're golfing, but social distancing, I'd guess. Also, of note, the stock price of Kellogg over the last 2 years has dropped almost $7 a share. Now, a lot of times when the boss comes down and tells striking people, hey, look, the business isn't doing so good. Sales are down. I don't know that we can give you a big raise right now. Well, turns out while they're telling you that, they're still getting their raises every year. Look, so apparently what you can afford to pay employees and people who work at a company is not directly related to profitability or stock price. Well, that's amazing because I always hear it the other way around when we're talking about not being able to give people who make $13 an hour, $15 an hour. But CEOs are literally still making tens of millions of dollars a year and getting annual raises while tanking the stock price. Now, number 2, and we did this for the Frito-Lay strike, we did it for the Nabisco strike, and God damn it, we're going to do it for the Kellogg strike. Here is a list of all the brands that Kellogg's produces. Start scratching them off your shopping list. Because if Kellogg's doesn't want to pay their employees a living wage, then you, as a consumer who are dependent upon a living wage so that you can continue to be a consumer, well, you should just knock this out of your life. After all, that's what working class solidarity looks like. And last but not least, for the people who want to know what they can do aside from boycotting Kellogg's and dragging them on social media, well, the union could always use a little more support to keep the strike funds intact so that these workers can afford a long standoff if it has to happen. I will put the link to this sign up in the description below. So what does this mean for you, the average viewer at home, the fellow member of the working class? Well, number 1, it means you can scratch all those Kellogg's products off your list. Because if Kellogg's doesn't value people, well then we as people should not value Kellogg's. Trust me, there's just as many crappy cereals made by 3 other manufacturers of crappy cereals that we can go choose from. It's really not that difficult. It is quite literally the least we can do. But more importantly, what I would like to point out here is the larger macro view of what has been going on over the period of the last few months here in the United States of America as it relates to labor organizing. Every day, there is now a story somewhere of a co-op being opened, of a bunch of people working for tech bros who have finished meeting in little rooms in a basement somewhere in hushed tones and have decided to call for a union vote. And yes, for every single big strike you see out there, like Nabisco or Frito-Lay or Kellogg's, that the media will report on because those company words are buzzwords and that helps them with their filing of the webpage and the article and gets them additional clicks so they make a little additional revenue. But right now across America, there's no fewer than a dozen different labor strikes going on. You just haven't heard about them. And that is the same way that history comes about. Maybe you don't hear about all the smaller strikes. No, you probably haven't heard that there are 400 whiskey makers who are striking in Kentucky, or that there are 500 steel workers striking in West Virginia, or that there are 700 nurses in Massachusetts on strike, or there are more than 1,000 miners in Alabama on strike. No, you didn't even know about any of those. You're just hearing about these big stories. And this ties back to what I told you in the very beginning of the video, is that for every large-scale event that eventually gets viewed in a historical context, there are dozens of smaller events that you don't hear about that lead up to that event, that create the momentum so that you reach social mass and changes happen. So everybody, keep your eye on the prize. Show solidarity with striking laborers. And remember, the only people who are going to give a crap about members of the working class are fellow members of the working class. Until next time, my name is James. I am from the internet, and I am out. Peace.